these tests will help Miss O'Brien figure out where little girl needs help. Well, I don't know what planet the president is on, but the fact of the matter is, this is baloney. High-stakes test results almost never come back until the end of the year in most states, in Texas, New York, and Massachusetts. By the time the scores come back, they're not your students any longer. They have no role, they have no diagnostic role in helping you to find out where that child's weaknesses may lie. Their only function is to humiliate the school, to embarrass the principal, and to drive the principal further and further in the direction of doing rote and drill instruction next time around so that she can possibly pump the test scores before a second year of failure. Principals, even really good ones, I mean the best ones, are in a state of continual anxiety. And they pass it down to the teacher. Typically, you can't even say used, utilized. You know, the standards people want you to use big words, you know. It's a common affliction of poorly educated bureaucrats, to be honest. They think big words sort of substitute for real sophistication. You know, so you can't say, we copied an idea. Replicate. You know, it's all that phony education jargon. That's it. Children will prove themselves proficient, that's it, at the production of a narrative procedure. So I said, well, I went to a pretty good college, majored in English. I don't know what the hell that means. So the teacher says it means they'll write a story. So I said, a narrative. So I said, well, why don't you just write that on the board? He said, you can't. When the curriculum cops come around, the accountability people, they want to see their words and their number. The number, my friends, is useless. It's worthless. It has no benefit to children. This is a pure case of sacrificing the interests of children to the accountant mentality that's been foisted on our schools by the president's bill.
How are your daughters? Tell me about them.
They're great. The youngest one just turned 9, and then the older one remains 12 for a few more months. Mm-hmm. And they're good. I mean, this week is testing week at schools.
I hear a lot about that. Yep.
Yeah. So they're in 3 days of extensive standardized testing.
Mm-hmm. And what are the consequences of the standardized testing?
Well, the way I understand it, if a school's kids don't test well, they burn the school down. So it's pretty high pressure.
A lot of pressure on the kids.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the tests are written by people that nobody knows who they are. It's very secretive. Mm-hmm. And the questions are, because they have to prepare for these tests for a long time. A lot of the year is about the tests.
Teaching for the test.
Teaching to the test, they call it, because they decided there's a new way kids should think, and we're going to prove they're thinking it by having them pass these tests, or we burn the school down. So anyway, my kids kind of panic when they're in these, which is okay. You know, my mother was a math teacher, and she taught me that moment where you go, I don't know what this is when you panic. That means you're about to figure it out. That means you've let go of what you know, and you're about to grab onto a new thing.
That's great.
That you didn't know yet. So I'm there for them in those moments, and I go, come on, just look at the problem. And then I look at the problems, and it's like, you know, Bill has 3 goldfish. He buys 2 more. How many dogs live in London? Or something like that. So,
wow. That's crazy. Yeah, you better notify the fire department.
And amazingly, Arnie Duncan doesn't have that much of a, he's not an educator by trade, to speak of. Would you talk a little bit about his background?
Yeah, not only is he not an educator by trade, I mean, he was a functionary in the Daley administration, but because Chicago is under mayoral control of schools, which is another part of Obama's and Duncan's national agenda under the the federal stimulus Race to the Top funds. Because of that, what we have is exactly a school system that is led at the top by virtually no educators. There is only one educator in a high position. The board are all appointed by Daley. They are all bankers or corporate heads. We have a school system that as a whole is led by corporate managers, not by educators. And in fact, that's revealed in the fact that there's basically no research that supports any of the interventions that they've made under Renaissance 2010. And there's a good deal of research that demonstrates that it has been damaging to students and to communities and has not improved their education.
There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. By the way, it's the same big club they use to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice about you. They don't care about you at all, at all, at all.
That Chicago has basically a two-tiered education system with a handful of these selective enrollment magnet schools or boutique schools that have been set up under Renaissance 2010 in gentrifying in affluent neighborhoods, and then many disinvested neighborhood schools. So parents across the city are scrambling to try to get their kids into a few of these schools. So instead of creating quality schools in every neighborhood, what CPS has done is created this two-tier system and actually is closing down, as you said, neighborhood schools under Renaissance 2010 and replacing them with charter schools and a privatized education system, firing or laying off, I should say, certified teachers, dismantling locally elected school councils, and creating a market of public education in Chicago, turning schools over to private turnaround operators. And this is, in the bigger scandal, this is now the national agenda under the Obama administration for education.